honestly, it's so rare you see an article that instantly almost jumps out at you, where you can almost feel the author clutching at their pearls, being almost writing as if they are so shocked that a politician would even say such a thing. And we're going to go through one such article today. And of course, it's about my favorite boy, Ed Miliband, because I have said this before. I think Ed Miliband, to be honest, um, maybe, at the time he wasn't, or at least didn't come across as a very impressive Labour leader. But I'll tell you what, since then, he has been doing and saying stuff which have been, honestly, he's been knocking it out of the park. Like so much. It has been unbelievable. And to be honest, whatever happened to him after being Labour leader, whatever supplements he started taking after he was Labour leader, please give some to Keir Starmer, because he certainly needs to take a leaf out of Ed Miliband's book, because I've said this before, Labour needs to be more bold in certainly their policy offering and not being afraid to be bold. But again, that could be an entire topic of discussion by itself. But we're talking about this because Ed Miliband was recently at Glastonbury, and this is where, again, we're turning over to the Sun. But according to the Sun, he had the goal to say that Britain's electoral system is broken and that it needed to be fixed. And honestly, you can literally just feel the clutching at straws here that the Sun is desperately trying to go for on this. But oh my word. You just don't know what to say in response to something like this. It's unbelievable that they would even bother to write something like this, because it just feels so reaching. So reaching, honestly. It really does. But it's worth going over for it, because there has been a massive push in popularity for PR. And certainly, even more so, it seems to be more popular and more in the public consciousness than certainly it was going all the way back to sort of 2012, where we had the AV referendum. And I think that it has really gained in popularity. And as a lot of people have said, PR's time and the change to the electoral system is coming. If you may remember, we had that article from the Conservative Home even saying, as someone who was a Conservative, saying, yeah, PR is coming and we as Conservatives cannot stop it. So here you have essentially a reactionary article, annoyed that Ed Miliband dare even suggest this, and even put forward the idea that Labour is actually secretly plotting to change the voting system. I don't see how you can secretly plot it, especially if it's not in a manifesto. But there you go. Anyway, let's get on into this, because oh boy, oh boy, yeah. I won't tease you anymore, but let's go into this. But before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one additional link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button. There is the Pony Club, the Buy Me a Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, and of course the Patreon page as well, all which helps support the channel as well. If you just like to click the like and share button, like I say, it helps out very, very much so. So, as always, let's go on in to this. So, this comes from the Sun. Ed Miliband sparks fears that Labour is secretly plotting to change Britain's voting system by backing PR. For some reason, it hasn't included the thing there, but no. So, Ed Miliband has sparked fears that Labour is secretly plotting to change Britain's voting system after he declared, "I am in favour of electoral reform." And bear in mind, if a politician like Ed Miliband is all you have to say is, "I'm in favour of electoral reform," and yet the Sun writes such a reactionary piece to a politician saying as something as milk toast as that. Just yeah, they are terrified of electoral reform, and certainly the Sun is laying out that it does not like electoral reform. So the Labour frontbencher told an audience of lovies at Glastonbury that Britain's political system is broken and needs changing. The Tories have warned for some time that Labour would scrap Britain's historic first past the post system and replace it with proportional representation. This would make coalitions far more likely. Well, actually, it probably wouldn't for the time being. Yes, under PR, coalitions are more likely, and the parties would have to work together to get things done. You know, we've had a couple of coalitions because people forget we had obviously the conservative Lib Dem coalition, and then of course Theresa May went into coalition with the DUP, and people forget that was a coalition government. You know, so we have had coalitions under first past the post, and they are not a bad thing. It's just that the parties should work together. And again, you take Theresa May's um, ill-fated government of working together, where the DUP basically withdrew all their support from Theresa May's government and collapsed the government. Um, Obviously, that is potentially more stuff that could happen, but that is politics. That is how it works. And of course, parties go in and they negotiate. They talk about all this stuff together. So the idea that coalitions are a bad thing, because I certainly seem they want to get that across that coalitions are bad. Coalitions aren't necessarily bad. Like I say, under PR, you would get a far more representative system of certainly of how people would vote, because under our current first past the post system, you really don't. That's why we have to really get tactical voting on the board, and we have to sort of, vote tactically in many of these areas, which again is something I don't think that the Sun is in favor of people doing. So it really just seemed from the Sun that you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You support these things. So let's see what he had to say. So, speaking at an eco-activist event at the music festival, Mr. Miliband said, "You are completely right that our political system is broken and needs a change. I'm in favor of electoral reform, and I am in favor of a big change to our system." Good, but you know, and I'm glad that he is, and we've got a really good ally, to be honest, on the front benches pushing for PR. Um, so that is good, and we just need more people like that in the party, and we need to start converting more MPs over to that. My own MP Dan Jarvis has said, while he isn't in favour of PR, he would support it. Now, of course, we have to sort of change him and get him over the line eventually, and of course, that is somewhat hard to do. I will admit that. But it's all about sort of engaging with politicians and getting them to change their minds on these subjects and getting them to sort of realize that. But that is hard to do on that, and I will admit that is hard to do. But we have seen the Labour for PR and the PR campaign really step up and really bring this support and do that, and they have got steadily over time more Labour MPs to do that. So this is what we have to do. And of course, if you are a member of the Labour Party, then of course, vote every chance and opportunity within the party to put in Labour MPs who are pro proportional representation. Ask them questions when you see that. Write a letter to them saying, you need to, you should support, proportional representation, and change, reform our voting system. There's all kind of stuff that we can do really as campaigners, and it is really sort of putting pressure on MPs and in the party to enact that change. But it is hard and it is a long process to do. So back to it. Mr. Miliband's teams said he was referring to Labour's policy to give the votes to 16-year-olds. Again, not a bad idea. You start paying taxes at that age, so why shouldn't you from 16 be able to have the vote? But Tory MPs have accused the shadow climate secretary of letting the mask slip on PR. So bear in mind, he bear in mind if that was his statement of you are completely right, our political system is completely broken and needs a change. I'm in favor of electoral reform. I'm in favor of a big change to our system. Now, it doesn't exactly explicitly say that he's in favor of PR there, and it would be interesting to see what the full context of that question actually was. What that in response he was, asking that. And even if it was just in favor of the like giving votes to 16-year-olds, that's not a entirely bad thing. That is a good thing. As you said, from like the 16-year-olds, you get given a national insurance number. Why shouldn't you be allowed at that point to vote? Why do you have to wait until 18? What's the difference between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old? There's not really a lot of difference, to be honest, in what is essentially a 2-year gap at that point. But of course, at 16, you are expected to sort of pay taxes and a load of other stuff. So this is what the Conservatives had to say. So Brandon Lewis, the former Conservative Party chairman, said, bizarre that when the country wants the government to be focused on the issues that affect everyday lives like inflation and war on our continent, Labour seem to be focused on playing ideological electoral reform. So you can't talk about other subjects. Again, yes, those are two big things that we that are affecting us, but that doesn't mean that you cannot have other conversations going on in parallel with those as well. That doesn't make sense, but there you go. Tory MP Paul Barstow said it looks like that Red Ed has let the cat out of the bag. He didn't exactly say that he wanted PR, but there you go. Labour wants a PR system that allows them to do backroom deals with the Lib Dems and Greens and lock the centre-right out of power forever. Well, here's the thing: it's not. It would lock you out of power forever, but that would mean that you, as a party, would have to appeal to a more broader voter base, which would mean that the current Tory party's massive lurch to the right would no longer be an electoral winner, and they would have to move a lot more to the centre. And that was what they have to know. That is what they are. That is what he's effectively he's saying, that we don't like that. And here's the thing: there's nothing stopping the Tories from them doing a deal with the Lib Dems or Greens under a PR system. There's nothing stopping them if they want to make deals as well. But of course, it would be deals that to get stuff done that they might not have to do because it's not, well, right wing enough for them. And I do like how he says, oh, centre right. The Lib Dem party really is quite a central party, but I'd say that a fair few Lib Dem voters are centre right, but certainly not as right wing as the Tories seem to be going at the moment. But he continues, make no mistake, if Labour wins the next election, PR will put EU membership back on the table and allow for an open border policy to be implemented as Sir Keir panders to the Lib Dems and the left wingers in his own party. Again, it's so funny that you have someone clearly so on the right saying that Keir Starmer is pandering to his left wingers, when you have many people on the left saying that Keir Starmer is this complete right wing. It's hilarious to see, but there you go. Tory MP Henry Smith, sorry, said that the Labour publicly play down talk of changing our voting system, but occasionally we get to see a glimpse of their real intent, as Ed Miliband's recent comments at Glastonbury. After all, he enthusiastically supported the alternative vote system in 2011, and just a few weeks ago, Starmer let slip that his plans to allow voters and foreigners, and of course 16 to 17-year-olds. Just because you want to expand voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds and foreigners who, again, foreigners, people who have sort of migrated to live here, and eventually, if they've been here for a certain amount of time, then they get the vote. That's not saying explicitly you're going to bring in PR. You're just expanding voting rights to new demographics. That's hardly bringing in PR. It's hardly, quote, secretive that he wants to bring this out when the Labour leader made this a public announcement. It's hardly secretive. Um, with PR2, they'd completely gerrymander the system to the left's advantage. Okay, how would we gerrymander the system to the left's advantage? Because currently, under the first past the post system, you've seen a lot of Tory areas with these electoral boundary changes get stronger. Is that not gerrymandering? Plus, again, I would love to see what he actually means by they would gerrymander the system to the left's advantage. Like what do you mean? How? Under PR, everyone would have a vote, and it would be whoever gets the most vote gets the seat. I don't see how you could gerrymander the system. But no, I would love to see what he would actually said. A spokesperson for Ed Miliband said that Ed was referring to Labour's programme of electoral reform, for example, of taking the Take Back Control Act to give power to local communities by extending the voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds. Again, I think giving more power to local communities, I think that's actually a very good thing. And I think it's something that Labour doesn't actually talk up enough of, to be honest. And then here you have the Labour spokesman said, we are not looking to change the electoral system. Just unfortunately, as much as we really want them to, Labour aren't at the moment. I think we've still got a lot of work to do, really, to get electoral reform really front and centre up there. But eventually, one day, I've said before, I think we are, and certainly the PR movement is stronger than it was ever have been. Even when you go back to 2011 and 2012, it's far, far stronger than it ever was before. And movements like Labour for PR, um, they've done fantastic work to really pump up and make bringing PR and proportional representation, bring it to front of people's minds to just make them understand this is actually switching over to PR would actually be quite a good and sensible move. So, like I say, and people who watch my channel, I'm in favour of electoral reform, not just for Westminster as well, but the House of Lords. And as I've said before, I think House of Lords reform, um, easily, easily a very good vote winner. Especially even with Conservatives, it's kind of interesting when you look at the numbers of do you want to make the House of Lords a second elected body? Conservatives are actually quite up or high on that level. So you'd have a lot of Conservative support if we did move for that. Whereas, as we said before, changing the voting system of Westminster going to be a lot harder battle and a lot longer battle, but it's one worth fighting and certainly would bring about good political change to the UK. But of course, I still think, as much as we want it to, we are still, I think, a few years off from actually really getting, or at least having a sensible, really talk about change. Like I say, when the Sun writes a real pearl clutching article where Ed Miliband didn't even seem to say anything about PR, and as his spokesperson said, no, it was in response to expanding voting rights to 16, 17-year-olds, and of course the local Take Back Control Act for local communities to give them more power and say in their local communities. He didn't really say anything about PR, but the pearl clutching, honestly, this article is interesting to say the least. And of course, the Tories do know that if PR did come, they would be locked out of power because they would have to appeal to more centrists. They would have to move to a more centrist right position because their current trajectory of becoming an even more hard right party. I do like the fact that he said, oh, yes, the center right would be locked out of power. Well, here's the thing, centrists, as we've said this before, probably the biggest voting bloc of people in the UK. And any general election, really, the party that wins is the one to get the most centrists. Like it or not, that's just politics. That's just how our system is played. And if you don't play the game, well, then you don't win. And of course, if you don't win, then you can't bring in your policies, you can't bring in any sort of change at all. Um, that's just how it is, unfortunately. But there you go. An interesting article about Ed Miliband was going to secretly bring in PR into, and Labour was going to secretly change the voting system. Ed Miliband didn't even say anything to those words or even effects. So there you go. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.